Hi, I'm Beck and welcome to some short book recommendations. I thought these recommendations might help people out with their reading goals. And the first one is called This Delicious Death, and it follows Zoe, Valeria, Jasmine, and Celeste, and they are all ghouls living in Southern California. The reason they are ghouls is because several years ago a pandemic hit, and this pandemic caused a change in people and it turned them into flesh-eating monsters. However, now that some time has passed, the ghouls have been reassimilated into our everyday world, and they eat what is called sin flesh. So it's a synthetic flesh that gives the ghouls what they need to function in society without obviously killing the humans. So as a last hurrah, these 4 girls are going before their graduation to a music festival together to celebrate that they're all going to college soon. But then while they're at this music festival, one of the girls accidentally goes feral and kills a boy, and there is a whole conspiracy around drugs and what is going on at this music festival, and things just keep escalating in the plot. But through it all, these girls really try and stick together, and I just had a great time when I picked this up. I didn't expect anything of it, and it just came to me by a peripheral kind of recommendation, and I thought, oh, I wonder if my library has it, and it did, and I just ended up falling into it and having a great time. It was a little bit gory, but it's also a young adult categorized book, so it's not going to go too far and too detailed, but it felt like enough to get the character across, the intent across. I really enjoyed the plot of the story. It sounds outlandish to describe it, but when you're in the book, it's really immersive. It shows flashbacks of all of the girls during the time they were realizing that they're ghouls versus now when they are together, they're doing a very normal thing and going to a music festival and they're trying to protect their friends. So it was just a great story of girlhood and I really enjoyed it. So that's why I want to recommend it. This one is the longest on this recommendations list. All of the other books are under 200 pages, but this is about 300. Then I've got a nonfiction, and that one is called How to Keep House While Drowning, and I just stumbled across this one as well. This story says it has 6 life-changing principles that will revolutionize the way that you take care of your home. And as I was reading this, I didn't necessarily take notes, but what I was understanding was the feeling from the author. So the author wrote this book as a don't feel guilty about living your life kind of story, because during the, COVID pandemic, the real pandemic, not the ghoul pandemic, when she was experiencing that, she was either out of a job or she found work really hard, and then she had a baby, and having a baby during COVID and feeling very isolated, coupled with having ADHD and trouble with executive function, she was like, I can't keep my house clean all the time. Sometimes I just get distracted. And that's not me being lazy, that's just how I work, and it's because I'm overwhelmed. So she wrote this book to make you go, you don't need to feel guilty, you just need to do what you can do. And to keep it less general than that advice, she broke it down into 6 different tips throughout the book, and I found them quite helpful. I think I've employed them peripherally in my routine, and I didn't realize that I was doing some of them already. So it was just a great learning experience, I guess, and working full time and having my partner work full time, like nobody else is here to take care of all of the chores. Like we've got to do all of that on top of our full-time work. So that can be quite a challenge, and this book just made me feel less guilty about it. So that's what I would recommend this for, as a bit of a breath of fresh air, but as a bonus, it's also 150 pages. So it's really not that long at all. Then I have a novella by one of my favorite authors, and that is Becky Chambers' A Psalm for the Wild Built. And in this sci-fi world of Panga, it's been centuries since robots gained self-awareness and then up and left society, and they disappeared into the wilderness, and humanity has functioned on its own since then. So in this book we follow a tea monk, and they don't really know what they want out of their life. They thought they were being fulfilled, but they've realized they aren't, and so they take their tea truck off the road, off the beaten path, and just try and take time for themselves. But while they're doing that and they're cooking their dinner one night, a robot walks out of the trees and poses the question, what do you need? And it is this robot's aim in life to find out what humanity needs after it's gone away for so long. This book really explores that question of what do people need, because it's going to differ from person to person, and it depends on how you ask the question and when and how. So I really enjoyed the almost quiet but approachable existential element to this story, and even though it was really short, it still felt like it left an impact on me when I read it. It was like eating a really nice piece of cake, but instead of making you feel heavy, it was actually really soft and light to eat. So it was all just an enjoyable experience that was also memorable, and that's why I wanted to recommend this, because it's not a sci-fi book that has a lot going on in terms of the plot, and I think I enjoyed it a lot more on my reread. I still enjoyed it the first time around, but I think I enjoyed it more on my reread when I realized that the plot wasn't going to be the be-all and end-all. So if you want a nice little break, if you want to make a cup of tea and then read this book, I would highly recommend. You could probably do it in one sitting, which is why I wanted to recommend it, because I listened to the audiobooks and they're quite short as well, and I just had a great time reading these in between the other books I had on my to be read pile, and it almost reset my brain, so I was then ready to tackle something a bit longer and a bit more complicated. So that's what this book really helped with, and it's why I want to recommend it. also, you know, Becky Chambers is one of my favorite authors, like I said, and I would always go back and recommend or reread her work. So now you can too. Next up is Convenience Store Woman. And while this is a short book and I think people should, you know, knock it off their to be read pile if they want something quick and easy, I also think that you need to approach this in the right headspace, because when I initially picked this up, I thought it was a non-fiction, and it's not. It's a literary fiction, which kind of makes a little bit more sense now, because when I read this, I loved the first half, I hated the second half, and I liked the ending. And that makes a lot more sense now that I know it's not a non-fiction. I'm like, oh, it's a literary fiction. It's supposed to be a message. So in saying that, this is about Kiko. She is 36 years old and she feels like she's never really fit in with society. As I was reading this, it felt very like autistic coded almost, in the sense that she wanted to do her own path and she didn't understand the societal expectations that people were pressuring her into, although she did want to conform to a normal level because she feared being ostracized. And it's called Convenience Store Woman because she's been working at a convenience store in Japan for 18 years now, and she's not really got any intention to stop. That's what she feels good doing. It's what she knows. It's her routine. And she takes pride in her work as well. She knows everything down to the sound, how people walk around and what people want and how she can help. And that's how she kind of gives back in her job. But when she's catching up with friends, they're all having kids or even having their second kid. They're all getting married. They've all got partners, and they're putting all of this pressure on her to conform to their standard without realizing that they're pressuring her into that. She skirts around things, and she's even talked to her sister about placeholder things to say so that people stop delving into her life, because she doesn't want to share that she hasn't reached these ballparks and she doesn't really want to either. But then during this book, a guy gets introduced and he was a trash of a human being. And this is what will probably be divisive about this book. I finished it because I was listening to the audiobook. I knew the book was fast and I wanted to add it to my reading goal. But maybe if I was reading it physically, I probably would have put it down just because this guy was the worst. Although because of interacting with him over a portion of time, Kiko made the realizations she did towards the end of the book. So she really brought her own agency by the end, but it was a frustrating second half to get to that point. So while it's a quick book and it is short, that's why it's on this list, it also might be like mildly enraging before the ending. So I'll leave that up to you whether you decide to read it or not. And then pivoting into ridiculous fiction is Smash and Grab. And this is one I read and loved recently because it was just so chaotic. And this one follows Simon, who's an archaeologist. He's working on the fossil that is going to define his career. But while he's working on it, he accidentally finds out he is the person standing between hired cartel muscle and this contractor who wants to return the fossil to the rightful owner. And so while Simon is being attacked, he gets saved by this guy in a pink mohawk who takes him under his wing and goes, "We need to protect you while we're on the road escaping from these goons." And so Simon and this guy end up forming a romance, but this guy, this pink mohawk guy, is a dinosaur shapeshifter. So he's not a werewolf, he shapeshifts into a raptor. And because they've got a shared interest of dinosaurs, and Simon has had a lot of trouble in his dating life, he realizes that he's forming a connection with this guy, and he's not uncomfortable about it, he's interested, but he's also never been properly with a guy before. So I like how it had that like queer awakening to it, and it was also just ridiculous because a dinosaur shapeshifter, like come on, who's kind of an assassin but not really. It was a fun time. The plot was believable enough. The ending felt a little bit quick. The I love you to me felt a little bit rushed, given that these characters have known each other like roughly a week and they've been on the road this whole time. The tension and the survival aspect of getting away from these goons has definitely heightened their connection, and they've been in close proximity, that forced proximity, that whole time, and it had a fantastic only one bed trope. But at the same time, I was like, you're only kind of throwing the I love you in because you are a romance book. Like, it didn't need to have that, and it would have been satisfying to me anyway. So I gave it, I think, a 4 stars. I think it's worth giving a try if you think it'll sound like a fun time. Like, it was a great, again, circuit breaker book. Unlike Monk and Robot, the Psalm for the Wild built, that was more of a cozy and relaxing time in between other reads, whereas Smash and Grab was that like energized, ready to read this, ready to finish it, and then move on to something new and fresh. So different kind of energies for in between reads, but I support both. And then lastly, I've got this one on my to be read list. So I actually haven't read it yet, but I thought I'd mention it anyway because it is a non-fiction as well, and that is Cultish. And in this non-fiction book, it says how cultish groups from Jonestown or Scientology to Soul Cycle and social media gurus use language as a form of power, and what makes cults so intriguing and frightening and what makes them powerful. So I'm fascinated in cults, but also obviously terrified by them. And I often see cults in a lot of the zombie fiction I read and some of the fantasy that I read. And it makes me interested in how language can be used to demonstrate that kind of behavior. Also, just human psychology fascinates me as well, and, you know, terrifies me. So that's why Cultish is on my list. If you've read it, let me know. I would like to know whether it's worth waiting for my library hold, because I think it will be an informative read. To be fair, it's about 300 pages, so that is equivalent to 8 hours in the audiobook. To me, that's not very long. I read a lot of long fantasy books. The others on audiobook, Smash and Grab was about 5 hours. Monk and Robot was like between 3 and 4 hours, and Convenience Store Woman was either 3 hours or less, and so was How to Keep House While Drowning. So they're all lower than that 10-hour mark, which quantifies like a longer audiobook. Usually I'm reading books that are like 25 hours long or higher, so these are all very small fry to me, and they're great to read in between other things. So that is it for my short book recommendations. Let me know if you've got any others to suggest down below. I would be very interested. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'll come and chat to you down below in the comments. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.